Dear learners, welcome to RPT in Library and Information Sciences at IIT Delhi. As you already know, I am Dr. Niladri Chatterjee, Professor of Department of Mathematics at IIT Delhi. Also, I am the Chair Professor in Artificial Intelligence in my institute. In part 1 of this talk, if you remember, I have explained the role of artificial intelligence in developing information systems. Now, in developing such a system, you need to incorporate knowledge, and as I have explained in the last class that this knowledge we can get from the data that we have. In my case, the data is in the form of texts, and if you remember, I have talked about semantic annotation of this text, from where we can gather information. This information along with expert knowledge or some other sources of knowledge can help us in building our knowledge based systems. So, let us revisit semantic annotation. So, semantic annotation is the process of attaching additional information to various concepts like people, thing, place, organization, acronym, numbers, etc., in a given text or some other document. When a document is semantically annotated, as I said, it becomes a source of information. So, as I said that we can use this annotated text in conjunction with expert and domain knowledge to build the knowledge base for developing the information system. And for illustration, let us consider one single sentence: NC and PS teach AI, also known as artificial intelligence, in IIT Delhi for BTech, MTech programs in computer science. So, let us see what knowledge we can extract out of it. So, for that we first semantically annotate the text, and as you can see, we can understand that NC is a person. So, it is a person's name. Similarly, PS is another person, AI is a subject name, artificial intelligence is also a subject name, whereas IIT Delhi is an institute, BTech, MTech are programs, computer science is a domain. So, like that we have annotated the text. Now, if this text we can represent in the form of graphs, it may look like the following. As you can understand that the words in purple colors are actually key words of that sentence. So, you can see that NC, PS, AI, artificial intelligence, MTech, BTech, IIT Delhi, these are the main words of this text, and we have put them in purple, and also we have marked the arrows with certain tags. These tags give sort of a relationship that exists between the nodes. But if we look carefully, we see that this graph does not help in finding answers to many domain based questions. For example, one can ask who is NC, what is IIT Delhi, what is BTech, what is AI, who all study AI. If these are the simple questions that we ask with reference to that particular sentence, we do not have any answer. Therefore, we need to enrich this information that we gathered from the sentence with some more domain knowledge. So, let us see how we fill the gap in this direction. So, this graph sort of tells you what are the gaps that was not there in the earlier graph. Say for example, you can see that NC and PC, they are, one of them is a professor, other is an associate professor. So, I use a tag is a to tell that NC is a professor, PS is an associate professor. Similarly, teaches in, assuming that one professor teaches in some institute, therefore, it goes to IIT Delhi. Question is what is IIT Delhi? IIT Delhi is an academic institute, and therefore, and each academic institute runs some academic programs. For example, IIT Delhi runs BTech and MTech program, then BTech MTech from which domain? From the domain of computer science, and you can see that AI is a subject belonging to that domain and artificial intelligence is a synonym of AI. So, the entire knowledge is captured in this graph. Still, it is not interoperable between inter-domain queries. For example, one may ask, who is the director of IIT Delhi? What is the contact number of PS? These are some basic questions who want to gather more information about the faculty members of IIT Delhi may ask. These are not domain knowledge, these are global knowledge outside the domain of computer science and AI, etc. Therefore, if we want to answer queries of this type, we may need to further enrich this graph, and perhaps this may give a picture of the relationship between different terms. So, if you look at in purple, we get the keywords that are given in that sentence. In blue, we get certain other words which are domain knowledge, and in darker black or dark green you can see the global information like NC and PS are persons. Each person is a living being, but what does it mean? It means that each person have certain properties that is very common to all living being, but of course, all living beings do not have a contact number. So, contact number is an attribute that should be added to a person's description. In a similar way, academic institutes should have a director, and as you can see that with respect to each academic institute, therefore, we should have an tag corresponding to has director. Like that, one can add or enrich the small knowledge that or the small information that we have got from that sentence into a knowledge base, where we can understand the relationships between terms which may be exactly in the sentence, or it can be gathered from the domain, or it can be enriched with our global knowledge. So, one can say, is it the final picture? Of course not. One can add even more information depending upon the queries that one needs to answer with respect to such domain. For our simple understanding, such a compact form of knowledge is termed as an ontology. So, what is an ontology? An ontology is a formal explicit specification of shared conceptualization. So, in other words, formally it represents the knowledge as a set of concepts within a domain, and it also specifies the relationships among these concepts. If we go back to the slide, now you understand each node which I have given in the form of a oval shaped, there is a concept, and the relationship between the concepts is being established in the form of arrows and label against those arrows. It can be used to reason about the entities within that domain. So, as I have already explained, if we know that each person should have a contact number, so the moment I reach the node of a person, the node corresponding to a person, we can always look for the contact number by following that tag. It enables integration and interoperability of data among different communities. What does it mean? Suppose we have a domain of artificial intelligence and teaching in IIT Delhi, somebody from outside, say government or ministry, they want to know what is going on there, they can come to this ontology, and by traversing they can find out informations that they are looking for. In general, an ontology development process may consist of the following steps. First, you study the domain, find out the relevant terms or identify the concepts that one needs to include in his or her ontology. Of course, it depends upon the nature of the queries that you want to answer. Say for example, with respect to IIT Delhi, if somebody is looking at from planning perspective, one may like to see what are the buildings, how they design. So, that becomes another ontology. In my lecture, I am not concentrating on such ontologies. Then what you have to do? You have to identify the attributes related to the terms and concepts, which I have already explained. Identify the relationships between the concepts, write the constraints or rules on these concepts and relationships. Say for example, contact number can be only with a person, not any living being, because other animals can also become a part of a living being. Document the ontology and test the ontology. You have to test whenever you are designing an information system, you have to test it with a set of test data to what extent it is able to answer your queries. Maintenance of the ontology is very important, because with time things will change and therefore, we have to update that ontology. So, here I give you a small task. Suppose I am looking at the library domain. Suppose I look at 3 different areas of a library: the books, the users and the administration. Then corresponding to each book, perhaps we can enter the following information: the title, author, publisher and the category or subject. Similarly, for the user, whether he or she is a faculty member or a staff or a student or some other from outside IIT. Similarly, in the administration we can think of the librarians, other staffs, etc. So, if you want to design an information system, then you can see that these are the basic pieces of knowledge that one has to incorporate into the system, and these will be further expanded. The relationship between them have to be established, so that we can answer query with the help of this knowledge base. The natural question therefore comes is that how to store this information inside a computer system or in an information system. The basic problem is that the semantic annotation or graph based representation schemes give us an intuitive idea about what are the pieces of knowledge that we need to extract from the given text, or say from the domain experts or from our global knowledge. The main problem still remains is that of problem of knowledge representation. How this information be stored inside your system, and that is little bit technicalities. But this is very important, because effective use of the knowledge is possible only if its semantic representation is efficient enough to give us access to the pieces of knowledge, so that we can retrieve it and we can infer from it. A natural question therefore arises is how to represent this knowledge. One standard way of doing it is through XML, that is extensible markup language. So, what is a markup language? A markup language is a computer language that uses tags to define the elements within a domain. As you have already seen, I have used different tags to mark the arrows, which tell us the relationship between different elements. It is very similar, as we will see later, that we need to add tags to different pieces of text, so that we can understand what it is meant for. It is human readable, that is markup files contain standard words rather than typical programming syntax. While several markup languages exist, the two most popular ones are HTML and XML. Perhaps all of you are somewhat familiar with HTML, which is called hypertext markup language. This is a markup language used for creating web pages, and its concern is the design and appearance of the page. For example, let me illustrate. Consider this HTML file. If you look at the contents, then we have used H1 corresponding to artificial intelligence, a modern approach. H2 for edition number 3, H2 is also for Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig, who are the authors of this book, like that. So, once I write such a small code of HTML, if we see the effect, it will look like this. Say artificial intelligence, it is H1, that means header of type 1, which is the highest level header. So, it is slightly bigger font. Edition 3 by Stuart Russell and different ISBN numbers, that you can see is in a smaller font, which is H2, header of level 2. Suppose you are not happy with this representation, you want to look it more beautiful, like this. Say you want to put the name of the author on the top, as a library often searches the books in terms of the authors, and then the title of the book, and then there are different informations, and you want to add more style by putting certain things in italics, then you have to use a file like this, where I have explained. If you look at the H1 here is of color blue, which writes Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig. Similarly, you can think of other tags which have given style to the document. So, the above examples make it clear that HTML tags provide only display information. It is up to you whether you want to write the author name first or the book name first, but as far as the display is concerned, it is only H1 and H2, it does not know which one stands for what. But such a markup language does not help us in answering queries. While answering queries, we need to know what is the semantic of that particular piece of text. Therefore, it leads to development of something superior to HTML, and that is called XML. Let me give you an example. The computer science book Artificial Intelligence, a Modern Approach is written by Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig. Suppose this information I want to store, so that I can extract out of it the book name, the author's name, etc. I may use this. Say book name is Artificial Intelligence Modern Approach, subject is computer science, author is Stuart Russell or Peter Norvig, and of course, then we close those tags. I can write it in a slightly different way. I can put the author's name first, then the book name, then the subject name, or I can write it from the top, the subject name, then the author's name, then the book name. So, you can understand that all three have different structures, but it does not alter their semantic content, because when I am accessing to retrieve the subject name, then all three of these will give me the same answer, that is computer science, similarly for book name and author name. Thus, what I say that the same content may be specified with different formats without affecting their semantic interpretation. This comes in the form of XML, which is called extensible markup language. So, XML has several advantages. It is independent of the platform and also independent of the underlying programming language. Once the file is put in the format XML, you can access it from your programming language. It can be used on any system and supports any technology change. No fixed set of tags, that is very important, because if you understand that we have used tags that are very clear to us semantically, that what is the book name, what is the subject name, what is the author name. So, that we can put according to our source of knowledge, and that will help us in giving or in attaching right semantic to the pieces of text. And this data stored and transported using XML can be changed without affecting the data presentation. Another important thing is that XML supports Unicode. Thus, XML can deal with any information written in any human language. It may be in English, Hindi, Bengali, Tamil, it does not matter. You can always use that, because Unicode is a standard coding system for different characters. So, let me give you an example of an XML document. So, suppose you are going to use a library. So, I have started with a bookstore, as you can see on the left side on the third line, and that ends at the end with a \bookstore. In between we have given description of 4 different books, their name, their category, their authors, their year of publication, their price, all those information you can store in an embedded form in an XML document. So, this is how one has to store this information. It does not mean that we cannot add presentation styles with XML. There is something called XSLT, which allows us to even to add style to our XML documents, and that is very important, and that looks good to transport your document through XSLT to another format. So, what is XSLT? XSLT is Extensible Style Sheet Language Transformation. It is a language for transforming XML documents into other documents or other formats such as HTML, plain text, other formatting objects, and which can subsequently be converted into a PDF or PostScript or PNG, that is an image. All those things are possible with the style file or the style sheet, which is called XSLT. It does not alter the original document, it will remain as it is, and a new document will be created based on the content of the existing XML file. Typically, the input documents are XML files, but anything from which the processor can build and query an XPath data model. By XPath data model, we mean that as you traverse the book data that I have just shown, say you have to go through the document to reach the particular content that you are using, that you are looking for. Therefore, you need to traverse through the document, and that describes the path. Okay. I am not giving you much technical details, because that is one has to learn. If any one of you wants to study this, you can refer to this URL and you will get a lot of information about XSLT. Okay, learners. So, I am going to the end of this particular talk, but before I stop, I give you some important terminologies. Say for example, namespace. In such type of knowledge representation, namespace is very important, because what is a professor, what is a subject, what is the domain, these things do not have a fixed meaning. Say for example, a doctor with respect to IIT system or any university system may mean a person with a PhD degree, but with respect to medical domain it may mean somebody who is a medical doctor. Similarly, the term conductor with respect to music domain may mean a person who is conducting a musical program. On the other hand, with respect to electrical engineering, it may mean something through which electricity can be passed. Therefore, the words that you are using in your vocabulary have to have their meaning specified, and that meaning should be related to the particular domain that you are working upon, and therefore, a namespace has to be created to store these terminologies. And as I have explained that the same term may be in different namespace with different meanings, but the terms related to the same domain and same concept should be put together in your namespace. Unicode, as I have said some time back, one has to understand it is a standard coding for consistent encoding, representation and handling of text. As I have mentioned that one may change the language, but if you are using a Unicode, it is very easy to extract the characters. We have already talked about XML. Something on the top of XML is called XML schema. It is something like giving you a format description of what is going to be the structure of your XML file or XML document. So, that is sometimes very important, because people may have different ways of stylizing their document. So, XML schema will give you a direction towards this. Another important concept is RDF or Resource Description Framework. It is a flexible language capable of describing all sorts of information and metadata. At the end of the day, when you have to represent all the knowledge that you have or all the information that you have with respect to a domain, that you have to store in a system. The simplest form of doing it is through RDF, which essentially is in the form of a triplet: entity, attribute, value. For example, N. Chatterjee is a professor of IIT Delhi. So, N. Chatterjee is a person. Suppose the attribute is ISA, that means is A, and the value is professor. N. Chatterjee works in IIT Delhi. So, the attribute is works in and it is connecting the two nodes N. Chatterjee and IIT Delhi. Similarly, IIT Delhi has director Professor Rao. So, you can store that information in the triplet IIT Delhi has director Professor Rao. So, like that you can store all the relevant information in your information system through RDF. Now, of course, that is not the end of it. There are other things. There is that is called a semantic layer. On the top of RDF, there is something called RDF schema, and then you have to think about language that can play with such markup documents, that will play with such markup documents, and one very common language is OWL, which is a language for handling ontology. And as you go for developing an information system, you will learn more about these concepts. Okay, friends, with that I stop here today, and if you have any queries, you can always address to the ORBIT portal, or you can write directly to me. Here is my email address. Okay, I thank you, the Central Library of IIT Delhi, for organizing this ORBIT, and I am thankful to you if this 2-part lecture helps you in building information systems. I will be happy, and that will be the success of the effort. Thank you.